The communication array on Zephyr Prime crackled with static as another distant star system went silent. Admiral's four arms trembled as he watched the tactical display update. 3 more worlds had vanished from their sensors in the last hour. The red dots marking dead systems now outnumbered the green ones showing life. "How many does that make?" asked his communications officer, her voice barely a whisper. 47 systems, replied. His species had evolved from peaceful herbivores, and their large eyes showed every emotion clearly. Right now, they showed pure terror. 47 worlds that no longer exist. The thing they called the Void Swarm had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of their territory. At first, the scientists thought it was a natural phenomenon. Space was full of strange things, after all. But then the first reports came in from the outer colonies. Ships made of metal and flesh combined in impossible ways. Creatures that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. Worst of all, they consumed everything in their path and used the matter to make more of themselves. The fleet had tried to fight them once. It had been a disaster. Their elegant ships, designed for exploration and peaceful trade, were no match for the nightmare vessels of the swarm. The enemy had absorbed their weapon fire and turned it back on them. Boarding pods had latched onto their ships and converted the crews into something else, something that served the swarm. Now they were down to their last few worlds, and the swarm was closing in on Zephyr Prime itself. "Sir," the communications officer said, "the Council is requesting an update." Nodded sadly. The collective was a democracy. 7 different species had joined together in peace and friendship. They shared technology, culture, and resources. They had built beautiful cities and peaceful trade routes. None of them had ever needed to build weapons of war. He activated the council chamber display. The holographic faces of the other species leaders appeared around him. The crystal beings from Altair, the aquatic, the hive minds, and others. All of them looked as frightened as he felt. "The situation is unchanged," reported. "The swarm continues to advance. At their current rate of consumption, they will reach our core systems in 72 hours. Counselor, one of the crystal beings, flickered with distress patterns. "Have any of the other galactic powers responded to our distress calls?" The hegemony classified our situation as a Category 9 extinction event and closed their borders, said. "The Trade Federation has done the same. The peacekeepers said they lack the military assets to intervene against a swarm incursion." The council chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what those responses meant. The galaxy had seen void swarms before. 3 star systems had been completely consumed in the past 1,000 years. No one had ever found a way to stop them. The standard galactic protocol was simple: evacuate what you could and seal the borders to prevent spread. "What about the outer rim species?" asked the aquatic representative. "Surely someone will help." Aide whispered in his ear. He nodded grimly. "The warrior clans of Say the Swarm is too dangerous to engage. The machine collective has gone into full defensive mode. Even the berserkers have declined to respond." If the berserkers would not fight, then truly nothing could be done. They were known across the galaxy as the most aggressive species in existence. They had built their entire culture around warfare and combat. If even they thought the swarm was too dangerous, then there was no hope. "Then we are alone," said, her crystalline form dimming. "Perhaps," said, "we should prepare evacuation ships, save what population we can." "Where would we go?" asked. "No one will accept refugees from a swarm zone. They fear contamination." The council meeting continued, but it was really just a formal exercise now. They all knew they were discussing the end of their civilization. 7 species, millions of years of evolution, countless worlds of art and culture and love, all about to be consumed by mechanical horrors from the void. Meanwhile, on the edge of human space, Commander Sarah was finishing her night shift at Monitoring Station Echo 7. It was a lonely job, but someone had to watch the deep space communication arrays. Most nights, she just logged automatic trading signals and navigation beacons. Tonight was different. The signal came in at 3:47 hours, ship time. It was broad spectrum, high power, and desperate. Translation software took several minutes to process it because it was in 7 different languages simultaneously. When the translation finished, stared at her screen in surprise. It was a distress call, but not from any species in the human databases. The message was simple and heartbreaking. This is Admiral of the Collective, broadcasting on all frequencies. Our civilization is under attack by the entity known as the Void Swarm. 47 star systems have been consumed. We have perhaps 70 hours before total extinction. We request immediate military assistance from any species capable of providing it. We offer all our technology, all our resources, everything we have in exchange for help. Please, if anyone can hear this, please help us. We do not want to die. Read the message 3 times. She had never heard of, but the desperation in the transmission was clear even through the translation software. She checked her databases. No records of this void swarm either, but the message made it sound like some kind of unstoppable force. She hesitated for a moment. Protocol said to log unknown transmissions and forward them to Intelligence Division for analysis, but something about the message bothered her. Maybe it was the way it said, "We do not want to die at the end." So simple, so honest. Made a decision that would change galactic history. Instead of routing the message to intelligence, she sent it directly to Terra Command with a priority flag. In the message header, she typed a simple note: "Unknown species requesting emergency military assistance. Recommend immediate response." She hit send and went back to her other duties, unaware that she had just set in motion events that would make humanity the most feared and respected species in the galaxy. At Terra Command, Admiral was reviewing fleet readiness reports when the priority message arrived. He read it twice, then called for his senior staff. "Get me everything we can find on these," he ordered, "and find out what this void swarm is. If someone is asking for help, we need to know if we can provide it." The wheels of human military response began to turn. Admiral stood in the briefing room at Terra Command, studying the holographic display that showed everything they had learned about the crisis. It had taken his intelligence teams 18 hours to gather information from galactic databases, and what they found was not encouraging. "The Void Swarm has appeared 3 times in recorded galactic history," reported Commander Lisa Park, his intelligence chief. "Each time, it completely consumed entire star systems. No known weapon has ever been effective against it. The standard galactic response is immediate evacuation and border closure." "What about military intervention?" asked. "None has ever been attempted, sir. Every major galactic power classifies Void Swarm events as unsurvivable. The recommendation is to let it consume everything in its path and hope it goes dormant afterward." Frowned. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars from 3 different wars. Earth had been a violent place for most of human history, and even now that they had reached the stars, conflict seemed to follow them. "How long do they have?" "Based on the swarm's rate of advance, approximately 60 hours until it reaches there." "And how long would it take our closest battle group to reach them?" Park checked her data pad. Battle Group 7 is currently 48 hours away at maximum burn. "Then we need to move now," said. "Prep the fleet for immediate departure." "Sir," Park said carefully, "I should mention that the Galactic Council has specifically advised all species not to intervene. They believe any military action will only result in additional casualties." Looked at her steadily. "Commander, in your opinion, if someone was attacking Earth and we called for help, what would you want other species to do?" "Help us, sir." "Then that settles it. Contact Battle Group 7 and tell them they have new orders." 20 minutes later, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was in chaos. The main chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all talking at once. The news that humans had decided to respond to the distress call had spread through the galactic communication network faster than light-speed travel. Council Speaker, a tall being with purple skin and 6 arms, called for order. The council recognizes Ambassador Harrison of the human delegation. Ambassador Sarah Harrison stood up. She was a small woman compared to most of the aliens in the chamber, but she carried herself with confidence. Thank you, Speaker. The Human Defense Fleet is responding to a legitimate distress call from the collective. We see no reason for debate. The chamber erupted again. Ambassador of the Republic stood up, her translucent body flickering with agitation patterns. The humans cannot be serious. The void swarm cannot be fought. It is a force of nature, like a supernova or a black hole. We appreciate the concern, Harrison replied calmly, but Earth has dealt with forces of nature before. We tend to survive them. You do not understand, said Ambassador of the Aquatic Collective. Your species evolved on what you call a Class M planet, but what the rest of the galaxy recognizes as a death world. Your planet has weather patterns that would kill most sapient life. Your gravity is twice what most species can survive. Your star bombards your surface with radiation levels that cause cellular damage. And yet here we are, Harrison said with a slight smile. That is exactly the problem. Form brightened with alarm. You climb your world's highest mountains for recreation. You deliberately expose yourselves to stellar radiation to change your skin coloration. You consume ethyl alcohol, a substance that is literally poisonous for entertainment purposes. Ambassador Thixhell of the Armored Collective spoke up, his voice carrying through his species' mechanical translation device. I've studied human behavior patterns. You engage in activities that have no survival purpose but high mortality risk. You call them extreme sports. You launch yourselves from aircraft at high altitude and deploy fabric wings to slow your descent. You ride on mechanical devices at speeds that would be fatal if you lost control. You surf, added with what sounded like horror in his voice. Yes, we surf, Harrison agreed. We also sail, skydive, rock climb, and play contact sports. Your point. Our point, said Speaker, is that humans approach danger differently than any other known species. Most sapient life evolved from prey animals. You evolved from persistence predators on a world where even the plants are dangerous. Harrison looked around the chamber. So you are saying that because we come from a dangerous world, we should not help people who are in danger. We are saying that your response to danger is not rational, replied. When faced with an impossible threat, most species retreat and seek alternative solutions. Humans, according to our behavioral studies, become more aggressive and more likely to engage in self-destructive behavior. You mean we fight back? You mean you attack things that cannot be defeated? Translator conveyed his exasperation. The berserkers are the most warlike species in the galaxy. Even they refuse to engage the void swarm. Harrison was quiet for a moment, then spoke more seriously. Members of the council, I understand your concern, but they asked for help. In human culture, when someone asks for help, you help them. It is that simple. Even if it means your own destruction, asked Speaker. Especially then. The chamber fell silent. The concept was so alien to most of the species present that they struggled to process it. Ambassador finally spoke again, her voice much quieter. The human military uses a phrase that our linguists have had difficulty translating. Death before dishonor. Can you explain what this means? Harrison nodded. It means that there are some things worse than dying. Abandoning people who need help is one of them. But if you die helping them, you will have accomplished nothing except adding to the casualties, pointed out. Maybe, but maybe we will not die. Maybe we will find a way to win. Against the void swarm, impossible. We will see. Meanwhile in space, 12 human ships were already accelerating toward space at maximum speed. They were not the massive dreadnoughts that other species built. Human military doctrine favored smaller, faster ships that could adapt to changing situations. Each vessel was packed with Marines who trained for combat in environments that would be instantly lethal to most galactic species. Aboard the flagship Indomitable, Admiral was reviewing the tactical situation with his senior officers. The briefing room was cramped by alien standards, but humans were used to working in small spaces. Intelligence estimates the swarm has approximately 200 vessels of various sizes, reported Commander, his tactical officer. They do not appear to follow standard ship design principles. Some are organic, some are mechanical, and some appear to be combinations of both. Weapons asked. Unknown. Previous encounters indicate they can absorb energy weapon discharges and redirect them. They also deploy boarding organisms that convert crew members and ship systems to serve the swarm. Sounds like Tuesday, muttered, earning chuckles from his staff. It was an old human saying that meant they had faced worse odds before. Sir, said Commander Park, I should point out that our exit strategy is limited. If we cannot defeat the swarm, we may not be able to retreat successfully. Looked around the table at his officers. They were men and women who had volunteered to travel to the most dangerous regions of space to fight threats that other species would not even approach. Anyone want to turn around? He asked. The response was unanimous silence. Good, said. Then let us go show the galaxy what death do when someone needs help. The 12 ships of Battle Group 7 continued their journey toward what every other species in the galaxy believed would be their destruction. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of space, and every sensor officer immediately understood why the galaxy was so afraid of the void swarm. Where the star charts showed 3 populated worlds, there was now nothing but twisted metal structures floating in space. The planets themselves were gone, completely stripped down to their cores. In their place were geometric nightmare constructions that hurt to look at, pulsing with energy that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. My God, whispered Commander from the tactical station, they ate entire planets. Admiral studied the sensor readings with grim concentration. His 40 years of military service had shown him many horrors, but nothing quite like this. How long does it take to consume a planet? Based on the energy signatures, approximately 6 hours per world, replied. They are not just destroying them, sir. They are converting all the matter into those structures. And those structures are producing ships. Yes, sir. We are tracking approximately 400 vessels of various configurations emerging from the construction zones. Nodded. The odds were worse than their intelligence estimates, but not impossibly so. Human military doctrine was built around fighting larger forces with superior tactics and adaptability. Signal from the fleet, sir, reported Communications Officer Tors. Put it through. The main screen flickered, showing Admiral in what appeared to be the bridge of a damaged ship. The alien's 4 arms were bandaged, and his large eyes showed exhaustion and despair. Human vessels, this is Admiral of the remaining forces. You should not have come. The swarm cannot be defeated. Please save yourselves while you still can. Stepped forward so could see him clearly. Admiral, this is Admiral of the Human Defense Fleet. We received your distress call and we are here to help. You do not understand, said, his voice breaking slightly. We tried to fight them. They absorbed our weapons and turned them against us. They boarded our ships and converted our crews. They learn from everything we do and become stronger. There is no way to win. How many ships do you have left? 15 vessels, but most are barely functional. We lost over 300 ships in the first engagement. Could see other officers in the background of the transmission. They all had the same look of hopeless terror. These people had watched their entire civilization being consumed, and had concluded that resistance was impossible. "Admiral, please transmit all your tactical data from previous encounters. We need to understand what we are facing." "It will not matter," said sadly, "but I will send what we have. Perhaps your people can escape before it is too late." The transmission ended and turned to his staff. Analysis. Commander pulled up the combat recordings. The swarm ships appear to have adaptive defensive systems. When the fired plasma weapons, the swarm absorbed the energy and redirected it. When they switched to kinetic projectiles, the swarm developed deflector shields. When they tried electronic warfare, the swarm turned their own computer systems against them. "What about the boarding actions?" "Nightmare fuel, sir." Switched to internal ship recordings that made several officers look away. The boarding organisms appear to be part biological, part mechanical. They convert crew members into hybrid entities that serve the swarm. The process takes approximately 10 minutes per individual. Studied the recordings with professional detachment. In his experience, every enemy had weaknesses. The key was finding them before they found yours. "Contact Battle Group 7, he ordered. "We are going to probe their defenses. I want to see these adaptive systems in action." 20 minutes later, the human fleet engaged the leading edge of the Void Swarm. The enemy vessels were unlike anything in human military databases. Some looked like mechanical spiders the size of battleships. Others were organic creatures with metal grafted onto their bodies. A few appeared to be ships that had been partially converted, still showing pieces of their original designs. "Firing solution locked," reported Weapons Officer Martinez. "Fire ordered." The human ships opened up with plasma cannons, particle beams, and missile barrages. For a moment, it looked like they were having success. Several swarm vessels took direct hits and began venting atmosphere. Then the adaptation began. The damaged swarm ships began to glow, and the energy from the human weapons was absorbed into their hull plating. Within minutes, the same energy was being fired back at the human fleet with twice the intensity. "Shields holding but barely," reported. "They are using our own weapons against us." "Switch to kinetic weapons," ordered. The human ships began firing solid projectile slugs and explosive shells. Again, initial success. Again, rapid adaptation. The swarm ships developed energy shields that deflected the projectiles harmlessly into space. "Sir, we are not having any significant effect on their forces," Martinez reported. "But we are learning," replied. "Continue engagement. Rotate weapon types every 30 seconds. I want to see how fast they adapt." The battle continued for an hour, with the humans cycling through every weapon in their arsenal. Each time, the swarm adapted within minutes. Worse, the enemy was learning human tactics and beginning to predict their movements. Then disaster struck. "Boarding pods incoming," shouted. "They have launched some kind of organic projectiles directly at our hulls." The alien projectiles were like nothing the humans had seen. They moved like living creatures, dodging point defense systems and latching onto ship hulls with organic claws. Within seconds, they began burning through the armor plating. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, reported Damage Control Officer Park. "Boarding organisms are inside the ship." Grabbed the ship-wide communication system. "All Marines to combat stations. We have been boarded. Remember your training and watch each other's backs." What followed was the first time in galactic history that anyone had successfully fought Void Swarm boarding organisms in close quarters. The aliens had expected the humans to panic and flee like every other species. Instead, they found themselves facing opponents who had evolved on a world where predators hunted in packs and prey fought back with tooth and claw. The swarm organisms were efficient killers, but they had never encountered anything like human Marines. The boarding creatures tried to convert Corporal Williams on Deck 9. Williams responded by detonating a grenade while the creature was attached to him, killing them both but preventing the conversion. On Deck 11, Sergeant Martinez found herself facing 3 organisms that had cornered her squad. Instead of retreating, she ordered her team to vent the entire section to space while they were still in their combat suits. The organisms, not designed for vacuum combat, were swept out of the ship. Captain Torres, trapped in engineering with 2 converted crew members, did something the swarm had never experienced. He turned the ship's own systems against the invaders, flooding the compartment with radiation from the reactor core. The converted humans died, but the swarm organisms were disrupted long enough for backup to arrive. After 3 hours of fighting, the Indomitable was cleared of boarders. The cost was high 47 casualties out of a crew of 800, but they had achieved something no other species had ever done. They had successfully repelled a void swarm boarding action. Admiral stood in the damaged corridors of his ship, looking at the alien technology scattered around him. For the first time, he had samples of swarm organisms that had not had time to adapt to his countermeasures. "Get these samples to our science teams," he ordered, "and prepare the fleet for withdrawal." "Sir," Commander looked surprised. "Are we retreating?" Smiled grimly. "No, Commander, we are regrouping. The swarm adapts to everything we throw at it, but they adapt in predictable ways. They assume all life follows patterns of self-preservation." "What does that mean?" "It means," said, "that we are going to do something they cannot possibly adapt to. We are going to show them what happens when you threaten something they care about." He activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral, prepare for tactical withdrawal. We have what we need to plan Phase 2. As the human fleet pulled back from the immediate combat zone, Admiral watched from his damaged bridge in confusion. "They are retreating," one of his officers asked. "It appears so," replied, "but they fought the swarm for hours and survived. No one has ever done that before." "What do you think they learned?" Was quiet for a moment, studying the sensor readings from the battle. The humans had lost no ships and had actually managed to kill swarm organisms in close combat. It was impossible, but it had happened. "I think," he said slowly, "that we may have underestimated what these are capable of." Admiral stood in the main briefing room aboard the Indomitable, studying the holographic analysis of swarm organism samples his science teams had been examining for the past 6 hours. Around the table sat his senior staff, all of them bearing fresh scars from the boarding action. The mood was grim but determined. "Report," ordered. Dr. Sarah, the fleet's, activated the central display. "The swarm organisms are unlike anything we have ever encountered. They appear to be a hybrid of biological and mechanical systems, but the integration goes deeper than simple cybernetics. The biological components adapt and evolve in real time, while the mechanical components store and share information across the entire collective." "Which explains how they adapt so quickly to our weapons," said Commander. "Exactly, but there is something interesting about how they process information." Doctor highlighted a section of the organism's neural network. "Their decision-making systems are incredibly advanced for tactical adaptation, but they show a significant blind spot." "What kind of blind spot?" asked. "They cannot process irrational behavior. Every adaptation they make assumes that their opponents will act in their own best interests. Self-preservation appears to be a fundamental assumption in their programming." Leaned forward, "Explain." "When we fired weapons at them, they adapted because they assumed we wanted to destroy them while preserving ourselves. When we sent boarding parties, they developed countermeasures because they assumed we wanted to capture their ship safely. Every response was logical and predictable. But when Corporal Williams detonated that grenade, while the organism was attached to him, the local swarm network showed processing errors for almost 30 seconds, Doctor said. They literally could not understand why someone would destroy themselves to prevent capture. It goes against every behavioral model they have." The room was quiet as the implications sank in. Commander Park spoke first. "Are you suggesting we use suicide tactics?" "Not suicide," replied slowly. "Sacrifice tactics, there is a difference." "Sorry." Activated his personal data pad and brought up historical files. "Doctor, have you analyzed the swarm's response patterns to our defensive actions during the boarding?" "Yes, sir. They adapted quickly to our weapons and our standard tactics, but they showed significant delays when responding to actions that put our own people at risk. The decision to vent Deck 11 to space confused them for almost 5 minutes. Captain Tor's use of reactor radiation took them even longer to process. Because they could not understand why we would damage our own ship to fight them," said. "They can adapt to anything except tactics that violate their basic assumptions about survival behavior." He stood up and began packing, his mind working through the tactical possibilities. "Throughout human history, we have won battles against superior forces by doing things our enemies thought were impossible. We have charged into gunfire, fought with broken weapons, and held positions long after any reasonable force would have retreated." "The Alamo," said Commander Martinez. "Thermopylae, the Warsaw Uprising." "Exactly. We win by refusing to lose, even when losing is the logical choice." Turned to his engineering chief. "Commander, I need you to run some calculations. What would happen if we removed all the safety systems from our reactor cores?" Looked horrified. "Sir, without safety systems, a reactor malfunction would destroy the entire ship." "That is the idea. How big would the explosion be?" "Depending on the ship class. Somewhere between a nuclear warhead and a small supernova." "And if we deliberately overloaded the reactor?" "Sir, that would be equivalent to turning each ship into a guided nuclear missile." Smiled grimly. "Exactly, Doctor, would the swarm be able to adapt to that?" The scientist thought for a moment. "They would need to understand that we were intentionally destroying our own ships. Based on their behavioral patterns, I do not think they could process that kind of tactical decision fast enough to develop countermeasures." "Then that is what we are going to do." Turn to address the entire room. "We are going to refit every ship in the battle group for ramming attacks, remove all non-essential personnel to a single vessel, rig the remaining ships with manual reactor overrides." The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Commander spoke. "Sir, that plan has a 100% casualty rate for anyone remaining aboard the attack vessels." "Not necessarily. We can use automated systems for most of the approach. Skeleton crews only for the final attack runs." "It is still essentially a suicide mission." Looked around the table at his officers. They were men and women who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments in human space. They had trained for years to protect Earth and her colonies from threats that other species would not even acknowledge existed. "I will not order anyone to participate in this mission," he said quietly. "Every position will be filled by volunteers only. Anyone who wants to transfer to the evacuation ship will do so with no questions asked and no shame." Commander Martinez was the first to speak. "I volunteer for the ramming force." "As do I," said Commander. One by one, every officer in the room volunteered. Had expected nothing less, but he was still moved by their courage. Meanwhile, aboard the command ship, Admiral was watching the human fleet with confusion and growing alarm. His sensors showed the humans were conducting major modifications to their ships, but the purpose was unclear. "What are they doing?" asked his communications officer. "I am not certain," replied. "They appear to be removing equipment and personnel from most of their ships. Several vessels are showing massive energy buildups in their reactor systems." "Are they preparing to retreat?" "No. If they were retreating, they would be moving away from swarm space. Instead, they are holding position and reinforcing their forward armor plating." On his tactical display, could see the human ships undergoing modifications that made no tactical sense. They were removing defensive weapons and replacing them with additional armor. They were stripping out crew quarters and installing what looked like ramming prongs on their forward sections. "Contact the human fleet," he ordered. The response came from Admiral himself. The human looked tired but determined. "Admiral, what can I do for you?" "Admiral, our sensors show your ships are undergoing significant modifications. Are you preparing some kind of new weapon system?" Was quiet for a moment. In a manner of speaking, yes. "What kind of weapon requires you to remove most of your crew?" "The kind that requires absolute commitment," replied. "Admiral, I need to ask you something. How important is it to your people that your civilization survives?" Was taken aback by the question. "It is everything to us, our culture, our art, our history. If we lose Zephyr Prime, we lose everything that makes us who we are." "Then you understand why we are doing this." "I do not understand anything about what you are doing." Smiled sadly. "We are going to ram our ships into the swarm construction platforms and detonate our reactor cores. The explosions should disrupt their collective network long enough for your fleet to evacuate." The bridge fell completely silent, finally found his voice. "You are going to destroy your own ships?" "Yes." "That will kill your crews." "We are using skeleton crews and volunteers only. Most of our people will be evacuated to the Defiant." "But why? Why would you sacrifice your ships and your people for us? We are not even the same species." Was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone has to. Because if we do not fight these things, they will eventually reach Earth. Because it is the right thing to do." "Your plan is insane," said. "No rational species would consider such tactics." "You are probably right," agreed. "But we are not entirely rational. We are humans. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. And if your plan fails, then we all die together. But if it succeeds, your people live to rebuild. That is a trade we are willing to make." After the communication ended, sat in his command chair, trying to process what he had just heard. These humans were planning to deliberately destroy their own fleet in a desperate gambit to save people they had never met before. "Are they insane?" his communications officer asked. "I am beginning to think," said slowly, "that insanity might be exactly what this situation requires." On the main display, the Void Swarm continued its relentless advance toward Zephyr Prime. In 18 hours, they would reach the planet and begin the final consumption of the civilization. Unless 12 human ships could do the impossible. The final battle began at 400 hours, ship time. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Defiant, the only ship in his fleet that had not been converted for the ramming attack. Around him, his skeleton crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. On the main display, 11 human ships accelerated toward the Void Swarm's main construction platform, their reactor cores already building toward critical overload. "All attack vessels report ready," Commander Torres announced from the communication station. "Open the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral to all ships. Today we do something that has never been done before. We stop an unstoppable force. Not because we have superior weapons or better technology, but because we have something the swarm cannot understand or adapt to. We have the willingness to sacrifice everything for people we barely know." He paused, looking at the tactical display where the swarm fleet was already moving to intercept the human ships. "Each of you volunteered for this mission. Each of you chose to risk everything for strangers. That choice makes you the finest warriors humanity has ever produced. Whatever happens in the next hour, remember that your courage today will be remembered for as long as humans travel the stars." "Sir," Commander's voice came through from the indomitable, now fitted with ramming prongs and stripped of everything except essential systems. Swarm vessels are moving to intercept. They are adapting their formation to counter our attack vectors. Let them adapt, replied. Tors, signal the fleet. Tell them to move to minimum safe distance. On Admiral's ship, the crew watched in fascination and horror as the human vessels accelerated directly toward what appeared to be certain death. The swarm had deployed over 200 ships to stop them, and their adaptive weapons were already charging to fire. "This is madness," whispered tactical officer. "They are flying directly into the enemy fleet." "Yes," replied, "but look at the swarm's response patterns." On the tactical display, the Void swarm ships were moving in formations that assumed the humans would try to avoid destruction. Their interceptor courses were designed to force the human ships to change direction or be destroyed. They had not considered the possibility that the humans would simply continue straight through their formation. The first human ship, the Resolute, hit the swarm's defensive line at 60% of light speed. The impact with the first swarm vessel was spectacular, but the Resolute had been built for this moment. Her reinforced hull carved through the enemy ship and continued toward the construction platform. "Resolute is through the first defensive line," reported Commander Tors. "Hull integrity at 40%, but she is still accelerating." The swarm began to understand that something was wrong. Their ships moved to intercept the Resolute directly, but Captain Williams on the bridge of the doomed vessel had one final surprise for them. "This is Williams to all ships," his voice came through the communications system. "Manual reactor override in 10 seconds. It has been an honor serving with you all." The Resolute disappeared in a flash of nuclear fire that destroyed everything within a 50-kilometer radius. The explosion was so massive that it created a temporary disruption in the swarm's collective network. "Network disruption confirmed," Doctor reported from her science station. "The swarm fleet is showing coordination problems." But the victory was temporary. Within minutes, the swarm network had adapted to the disruption and was coordinating again. Worse, they now understood what the humans were attempting and were moving to prevent the remaining ships from reaching their targets. The next 20 minutes were the most intense space battle in recorded galactic history. Human ships, already damaged and running on skeleton crews, fought their way through enemy formations while their reactor cores built toward critical overload. Some ships were destroyed before they could detonate. Others made it through but missed their targets. Captain Martinez in the Valiant found herself surrounded by swarm vessels that had adapted to the human ramming tactics. Instead of trying to reach the construction platform, she made a decision that saved the mission. "All ships, this is Martinez. I cannot reach the primary target, but I can clear a path for the others. Tell my family I love them." The Valiant detonated in the middle of the swarm fleet, creating a gap in their defensive formation that allowed 3 more human ships to break through. Admiral watched from the Defiant as ship after ship disappeared in nuclear fire. Each explosion was a victory and a tragedy. Each flash of light represented volunteers who had chosen to die so that strangers might live. 7 ships through to the construction zone, Tors reported, her voice tight with emotion. 4 ships destroyed during approach. Status of the construction platforms. The Indomitable is on final approach to the primary platform. Reactor overload in 30 seconds. Activated his personal communicator. This is final words. Commander's voice came through clearly despite the interference from her ship's failing systems. "Tell Earth that we did our job, sir. And tell the galaxy that this is what humans do when someone needs help." The Indomitable struck the central construction platform at maximum velocity. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away and created a quantum cascade that rippled through spacetime itself. The effect on the Void swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Without the central platform coordinating their collective network, the individual swarm vessels began to malfunction. Their adaptive abilities failed. Their coordination broke down. For the first time in galactic history, a void swarm incursion was not just stopped but completely eradicated. The silence that followed was profound. Admiral stood on his bridge, looking at the tactical display that showed debris where 200 enemy ships had been just minutes before. Of his original 12 ships, only the Defiant remained intact. 2 other vessels had survived but were barely functional hulks. The cost had been devastating. Of the 800 personnel in his battle group, only 170 had survived, but they had achieved the impossible. "Admiral," Torres said quietly, "we are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. News of the victory is spreading faster than light-speed communication." Nodded, he understood what this meant. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy had just changed forever. 3 hours later, Admiral met Admiral aboard the Defiant. They was accompanied by representatives of all 7 species in their collective. Received them in his damaged briefing room, still wearing his combat uniform and bearing fresh scars from the battle. Admiral began, "I do not know how to thank you. You have saved our entire civilization." "You do not need to thank us," replied. "You asked for help, we provided it." "But the cost, so many of your people died." Was quiet for a moment. "They died doing what humans do. They died protecting people who could not protect themselves." "I must ask," said one of the other aliens, "why did your people volunteer for what they knew was a suicide mission?" Looked at the assembled representatives. They were all species that had evolved from prey animals on peaceful worlds. They had never faced the kind of existential threats that Earth had thrown at humanity for millions of years. "Because," he said simply, "there are some things more important than surviving. Protecting innocent people is one of them." 6 months later, Admiral stood before the Galactic Council in the same chamber where Ambassador Harrison had announced humanity's intention to help the council members who had once spoken of humans with fear now regarded them with something that was equal parts awe and terror. "The Void Swarm was believed to be an unstoppable force," Council Speaker announced. "Yet the humans have accomplished what no other species thought possible." Stepped forward. His uniform bore new decorations, but also new scars. The radiation exposure from the final battle had left permanent marks on his face and hands. "Speaker, members of the council," he said, "we did not destroy the swarm because we are superior to other species. We destroyed it because we were willing to do what others considered impossible." "And what was that?" asked Ambassador. "We were willing to lose everything to save people we had never met." The chamber was silent. Finally, Ambassador spoke. "Your tactics were unprecedented. You deliberately destroyed your own ships. You accepted casualties that any rational military force would consider unacceptable." "Yes," agreed, "we did." "Why?" Thought for a moment. "Because we are not a rational species. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We learned that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose, no matter what the cost." "But surely such tactics cannot be sustainable," protested Ambassador Thixhell. "You cannot sacrifice your entire fleet every time someone needs help." Smiled grimly. "You are right. We cannot do this every time, but the galaxy now knows that we will do it when necessary. That knowledge changes everything." And it did. Within weeks of the battle, a new designation appeared in galactic databases. Next to the entry for Terra Class M planet, a warning note was added. "Warning: inhabited by persistent predators. Species demonstrates extreme self-sacrificial behavior when allies are threatened. Do not engage unless prepared for total warfare. Recommend diplomatic solutions to all conflicts involving human interests." Humanity's fleet was still small compared to the great galactic powers. Their technology was not the most advanced. Their worlds were not the most populous. But they had something no other species possessed: the willingness to charge into hell itself if someone needed help. In the years that followed, the phrase "call the humans" became shorthand throughout the galaxy for situations that were beyond hope. When the impossible needed to be done, when the unstoppable needed to be stopped, when someone had to go where no rational species would dare to venture, the galaxy knew who to contact. They were humanity, and the galaxy was both grateful and terrified that they were on their side.